I once thought that, at some point, people would stop feeling pain when rejected by their own family. But it turns out that pain only changes shape, from a sharp stab to a lingering bruise, always stinging when someone brushes against it. This afternoon, amidst the bustling crowds of New York, I sat alone in my office on the 37th floor, watching the last rays of sunlight glint off towering glass windows. The city was loud and vibrant, so much so that no one noticed a 33-year-old woman like me biting her lip, rereading a short text message on her phone screen. "Don't show up to Dad's 65th birthday. If you do, security will throw you out." Signed, Mark Mitchell, the perfect brother in the family's eyes. Each word felt like a knife. I pressed my lips together, read it again, then snapped the phone shut on the desk. The final rays of the day streamed through the glass, reflecting my pale but resolute face. Before I could catch my breath, the phone buzzed again. I knew who it was before even looking. Evelyn, my stepmother. The woman who had always gently called me dear in public but spared no sarcasm behind closed doors. "Mark is right. Don't cause trouble. Today is your father's big day." Trouble. They called my existence trouble. I let out a dry laugh, a sound like someone knocking on an empty chest. After all these years, nothing had changed. If I must introduce myself, I'm Emma Mitchell, the biological daughter of Thomas Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Tech, one of the biggest names in the American tech industry. People call him legend, icon, tycoon. But to my family, I'm the traitor, the daughter who dared to abandon the path paved for her by my father and Mark. 10 years ago, I refused to join the leadership training program at the family company. I didn't want to be a vice president sitting behind a desk just because of the Mitchell name. I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet, to be recognized for my abilities, not my lineage. The price I paid for that choice was being treated like an outcast. Family dinners no longer included me. Holidays were reserved for Mark and my younger sister Madison, with my name scratched off every guest list. They called me a disappointment, and gradually they treated me as if I had never existed. Yet fate has a way of playing tricks. The one they cast out of their lives is now the one holding the key to saving the company they're struggling to keep afloat. I glanced at the clock, 4:30 p.m. The party would start at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Plaza Hotel, the epitome of luxury in the heart of Manhattan. Crystal chandeliers polished to a gleam, premium champagne ready to flow. Today was the social event New York's elite had been waiting for. Thomas Mitchell's 65th birthday, attended by politicians, investors, and tech industry stars. Amid all that grandeur, there was one thing he didn't want: my presence. I sighed. 5 years ago, I might have stayed home, turned on Netflix, and convinced myself I was right to distance myself from my family. But not today. I'm no longer the obedient daughter who endures in silence. I've built a place for myself that no one in the Mitchell household ever imagined. My phone lit up again. This time it wasn't a family message but a notification from David Kim, COO of my company, Carter Labs. "Everything's ready. Summit Capital will announce the partnership at 8 p.m. Emma, you sure you want to show up?" I smiled and typed a single word: yes. The irony. The Mitchells are scrambling to save Mitchell Tech, the family empire they thought was invincible. Meanwhile, I, Emma, the daughter they saw as a thorn in their side, hold the quantum battery technology every company covets. Tonight, I'll walk into that lavish room, not as Thomas Mitchell's daughter, but as the CEO of Carter Labs, a sought-after partner. The thought made me laugh, a bitter yet liberating sound. I'm not one for drama. But the Mitchell family taught me a harsh lesson. Sometimes, to be heard, you have to make the world unable to ignore you. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked down at the streams of cars below. This city never stops moving, just as my life has never allowed me to pause. I've been exhausted, wanted to give up, cried in the dark where no one could see. But my father's coldness and Evelyn's disdain forged who I am today. I no longer need their validation. I'm going to this party not to beg for approval but to show them the one they cast aside didn't just survive but soared beyond their wildest dreams. So, I'm Emma Mitchell, 33 years old, the daughter disowned by her family, Tonight, I'll step into the room where my father and Mark think they control everything. I won't need to shout or seek revenge. I'll simply stand there, as myself, and let the truth speak for itself. Are they ready to face the daughter they erased from their lives? Or will they keep denying me until the end? The answer will come tonight. Before I close my laptop, I want to ask you, the reader of this story, have you ever been looked down on, cast aside, or treated as an outsider by your family or loved ones just because you chose a different path? I know that feeling better than anyone. If you've been through it, leave a comment and share your story. Because sometimes, just speaking out makes us feel a little less alone on our journey. And who knows, that journey might be the start of something greater than anyone could have predicted. There's something more satisfying than validation, succeeding brilliantly in silence, while those who once belittled you remain oblivious. I always thought I'd grown used to my family's contempt, but every time I recall it, my heart still tightens. They looked at me as if I were a joke, a reckless child rejecting a ready-made paradise. Little did they know, while they mocked me, I was building an empire, one they never bothered to notice. Carter Labs. The Carter Labs office sits on the top floor of a glass building in Midtown, New York. Step inside, and you'll see the difference. No ostentatious leather chairs or oil paintings like my father preferred, but an open space filled with light, circuit boards next to laptops, and walls covered with prototype sketches. I walked into my office. The glass wall reflected my face, with the evidence of my journey behind it. A framed Forbes cover hung on the wall. Emma Carter, the woman changing the global energy industry. Next to it, Fast Company's Breakout Founder Under 40 Award. Across from it, a bold headline on Tech Future, Quantum Battery Technology, the Carter Labs Revolution. Each photo, each award felt like a slap to the criticisms of the past. I once heard my father say to my face, "Daughter, engineers are just tinkerers in garages. This company needs real leaders, not people playing with wires and circuits." I stayed silent then, but swore to myself that one day I'd show him. My garage was where the future began. From a tiny apartment with outdated equipment, I and a group of young engineers created something no one believed possible, the Carter Quantum Battery. We found a way to store 10 times the energy of a standard lithium battery, charge in minutes, and do so without harming the environment. That technology is no longer just an idea, it's a product the world craves. The sad or perhaps amusing irony is that Mitchell Tech, my father's company, is now one of its most desperate customers. The market has outpaced their outdated machines. Electric vehicles, energy storage, clean factories, all are racing to get the technology my team and I hold. My phone rang. I picked it up, hearing the familiar voice of David Kim, my right-hand man. "Emma, we just got confirmation from Summit Capital. They want to ensure you'll be there for the announcement tonight. James Summit made it clear. The CEO of Carter Labs' appearance will be the highlight of the evening." I smiled, leaning back in my chair. James Summit, Wall Street's legendary investor. One handshake from him could save or sink a corporation. And tonight, he'd announced the historic partnership between Summit Capital and Carter Labs. A company my family scorned, a name they never bothered to mention, is now the center of the industry. Isn't that interesting? I stood, walking along the bookshelf lined with research files. Each folder reminded me of sleepless nights, instant noodle dinners, and days worrying about office rent. Where was my family then? Probably raising glasses at lavish parties. Meanwhile, in the dark, I had one thing guiding me: the belief that I wasn't wrong. Success doesn't come with applause. It arrives in the quiet moments when you have only yourself to cling to. Then one day, the light bursts forth, shining straight into the faces of those who mocked you. I remember my first meeting with Summit Capital. James sat across from me in a pinstripe suit, his sharp eyes gleaming. He didn't care about my age or gender, only one thing: could this technology truly change the game? I opened my laptop, displayed the quantum battery schematic, and placed a tiny prototype palm-sized on the table. "Mr. Summit," I said, "this device can run for a week without recharging, and it's made with a completely clean process. This isn't science fiction, it's reality." He picked it up, his eyes shifting from surprise to excitement, then resolve. A week later, we signed a $1 billion memorandum of understanding. Tonight, that deal would be officially announced. I could have stayed out of it, let Mitchell Tech collapse on its own. But I chose differently. I wanted them to see, not with malice but with undeniable truth, that the daughter they cast aside held their fate. You might call it revenge. To me, it's justice. Justice for the years I was treated like a shadow. For the times Mark tore my blueprints in front of me. For the family meetings where Evelyn declared, "Darling, you were born to live quietly, not to compete with men." I didn't need to respond then. I let my work answer. And today, that answer echoes across Wall Street. I glanced at the tablet on my desk, displaying the company's valuation chart. Carter Labs is now valued at $4.2 billion, a number my father never dreamed I could achieve. Yet amid all those massive figures, I saw something smaller. In an old notebook on my desk, on the last page, my mother's handwriting from when I was 16. "Emma, you will change the world in your own way. Never let anyone tell you you can't." The ink has faded, the paper yellowed, but every time I read it, my eyes sting. My mother believed in me when the world turned its back. Today, I believe she'd be proud. The clock struck 5:30 p.m. I had an hour and a half to prepare. Outside, the plaza glowed, guests streaming in, and my father was likely basking in the spotlight beside Mark, his pride. They had no idea that when the music played and the champagne flowed, the room would fall silent at the sound of my name. Not Emma Mitchell, the disappointment, but Emma Carter, CEO of Carter Labs. A secret I'd kept for so long was about to be revealed before hundreds of eyes. And I didn't even need to try. The truth alone would be earth-shattering. I closed my laptop, slipped on my coat. In the mirror, I saw a different woman, no longer the daughter excluded from family dinners, but one who had built her own future. Perhaps tonight, someone would crumble under the truth. There might be tears, anger, but one thing I knew for sure. From the moment I stepped into the plaza, the game would no longer be theirs. Some memories never fade. They play like an old film reel, looping in your mind, each replay adding a layer of pain. For me, the clearest memory isn't of the lavish parties at the Mitchell estate, but of the small two-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, where my mother and I lived in brief moments of peace before my world turned upside down. I remember that afternoon vividly. Outside, snow fell heavily, blanketing the narrow alley. I was 16, curled up by the window, flipping through an old physics book my mother bought from a second-hand shop. The dim table lamp cast a warm glow, barely fighting off the biting cold. But my mother walked in, her face radiant as if winter could never touch her. She placed a small box wrapped in newspaper before me, smiling. "Open it, sweetheart. It's not expensive, but it'll stay with you for life." I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a silver necklace with a crescent moon pendant, gleaming under the faint light. I gasped, almost choking up. "It's beautiful, Mom, but why a crescent moon?" She sat beside me, her warm hands smoothing my tangled hair. She spoke slowly, her voice gentle, yet firm. "A crescent moon isn't perfect, but it still shines, like you. You don't need to be the perfect mold others impose. You just need to shine in your own way." It was the first time someone told me my imperfections had value. In the Mitchell household, only perfection was allowed. Mark always topped his class, Madison was endlessly praised, while I, the girl who loved circuit diagrams over ball gowns, was just a shadow. My mother knew. She knew how many times I cried over my father's mockery, how often Evelyn sneered at me as the odd girl. But instead of telling me to fit in, she whispered something else. "Don't fear being different. That difference makes you Emma." I carried those words in my heart through the years, like a small flame burning steadily. Our Brooklyn apartment was far from luxurious. An old sofa, a finicky gas stove, and a bookshelf stuffed with thick volumes my mother scavenged from flea markets. But to me, it was the only place I felt I belonged. At night, we'd do homework together. She'd read while I sketched circuit diagrams. Some evenings, she'd quietly let me use her old laptop to run small programs. My father never knew, and he probably didn't care. To him, Emma was a flawed version of the Mitchell gene, one meant to produce leaders, not dreamers. My mother once said the crescent moon would remind me that even with a piece missing, I could still light up the night sky. I didn't fully grasp it then, but as I grew, I saw it as her lifelong message to me. I remember the spring morning when I was 17. My mother drove me to Columbia University's gates, where I'd earned a partial engineering scholarship. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "Emma, never let anyone say you succeeded because of the Mitchell name. Make them remember you for being Emma Carter." Yes, Emma Carter. I chose to take her last name from that moment. It wasn't just a legal decision, it was a declaration for my life. She passed away soon after, taken by a swift cancer that stole the only person who always stood by me. Her funeral was simple, attended by a few old friends, with not a single wreath from the Mitchells. My father claimed he was busy with meetings, Evelyn didn't bother showing up, and Mark and Madison sent a curt text, "Condolences." That day, I held the crescent moon necklace, vowing to live a life that would make her proud. If they wanted to forget me, I'd make the world remember Emma Carter. Sometimes, I was angry at my mother for leaving me with nothing but a necklace and a vague promise. But the further I went, the more I understood. Her greatest legacy wasn't money or status, it was belief. Belief that even when despised, I could create my own value. I wore that necklace the day I signed Carter Labs' first contract. I wore it when we secured our first investment, when the press called me a breakout founder. Each time I touched the crescent moon, I heard her whisper, "Shine in your own way." People often ask why I didn't immediately reveal my success to my family. Why hide for years, letting them think I'd failed? I'd just smile. Some things need to be revealed at the right moment. A crescent moon is most beautiful not when it's always bright, but when it appears unexpectedly, illuminating the night. Tonight, at the plaza, that light would shine. I closed my eyes, imagining my mother's face if she could see me now. She'd smile, unsurprised, because she always believed in me more than anyone. I once thought her death ended that belief, but it was only the beginning. She's why I didn't give up. She's why I'm brave enough to face a room full of disdainful eyes tonight. And she's why I choose compassion over revenge, because she taught me. The greatest victory isn't defeating others, but proving you were right. Have you ever had someone like that in your life? Someone who believed in you when the world turned away? If so, you'll understand why my mother's memory is so powerful. It's not just an old story, it's the flame that guides me. And if you've read this far, I want to ask sincerely, do you find this story worth following? If it intrigues you, comment why. If not, comment N. Whatever your answer, I'm grateful, because you've at least listened to a piece of a memory I once kept in the dark. Have you ever walked into a place where every eye turned to you, not out of admiration, but because they wished you'd disappear? If not, imagine the scene that night, stepping through the grand lobby of the Plaza Hotel, Manhattan, and you'll understand. The plaza at night looked like a golden palace in the city that never sleeps. From the towering crystal chandeliers to the red carpet underfoot, everything exuded the opulence my father adored. New York's most powerful gathered here. Politicians, billionaires, investors, and of course, the press hunting for headlines. On a massive backdrop, golden lettering curled, "Happy 65th birthday, Thomas Mitchell." My father, the tech tycoon, was reveling in the party of his life, and I, his daughter, stepped in like an uninvited guest. As I entered the lobby, I heard the familiar clack of heels approaching. Evelyn, my stepmother, in a form-fitting navy gown, her wrist sparkling with diamonds. She always knew how to command a room, but tonight, her eyes froze when she saw me. "Emma?" Her voice caught as if she'd seen a ghost. Behind her, Mark, my brother, appeared. He wore a flawless tuxedo, bow tie perfectly knotted. If you've seen my video about the brother who lived in his own delusional shadow, you won't be surprised by his first words. "What are you doing here?" "Dad doesn't want you here. You have 30 seconds to leave before I call security." He spoke as if he owned the plaza, and I was some trespasser. I took a deep breath. My heart raced, but I wouldn't let myself tremble. I looked into his eyes, giving a sardonic smile. "Mark, you always loved counting down, didn't you? But this time, you might want to check your clock." He frowned, clearly confused. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice. Emma, don't make a scene. This is your father's big night. He doesn't need you ruining it. I let out a soft laugh. Oh, don't worry. I'm not here to ruin anything. In fact, I'm just waiting for a special guest. Mr. James Summit. I'm sure you know he doesn't like broken promises. Both Evelyn and Mark froze. For a moment, their usual confidence vanished. They knew who James Summit was, a name that made Wall Street bow. But they couldn't fathom why he'd be connected to me. Don't lie, Mark stammered. Summit's here for Dad, not you. I shrugged, my eyes glinting with mischief. Think what you want, but check the time. He's probably arriving soon. Guests passing by glanced at me curiously. They sensed the tension. Some whispered, "Who's she? Looks like Emma Mitchell." But I thought she vanished. If you've seen my video about how the Mitchells erased me from every event, you'd understand their shock. I'd been absent from their gatherings for nearly a decade. To many, I was as good as gone. Mark leaned in, hissing through gritted teeth. Listen, Emma, this isn't your place anymore. Dad and Evelyn made that clear. I stepped closer, narrowing the distance to half a meter. You're wrong. This is exactly where I belong. And tonight, more people will see that than you think. Mark's face flushed, veins bulging. I knew he was holding back to avoid a scene. Evelyn's eyes darted around, worried someone would notice. She took a deep breath, whispering, Emma, if you have any shred of loyalty, you'll leave now. Don't disappoint your father further. Loyalty? I wanted to laugh. They'd discarded loyalty long ago. They cared only about appearances, the so-called Mitchell family pride. To them, I was just a stain they tried to erase. But tonight, no one could erase me. I stood tall, smiling confidently. Don't worry, Evelyn. Tonight will be unforgettable, not because I ruin it, but because I bring something everyone will have to witness. Just then, a commotion stirred at the entrance. All eyes turned. A silver-haired man in a gray suit strode in, James Summit. The atmosphere in the plaza shifted instantly. Conversations hushed, leaving only soft music. He walked slowly, each step commanding the room. My father, Thomas Mitchell, emerged from the crowd, his face lighting up as if greeting a savior. He hurried forward, extending his hand. James, it's an honor to have you at my birthday. Come inside. We have much to discuss. But James didn't shake his hand. His eyes scanned the room, landing precisely on me. I felt Mark's breath catch beside me. Evelyn stiffened, like a wax statue. The lobby fell silent, only James's footsteps echoing. He walked straight to me. Smiling, he extended his hand. There you are, Ms. Carter. I've been looking forward to meeting you. A moment of absolute silence. A guest's glass slipped, shattering on the floor. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, stunned, confused. Mark nearly choked. Evelyn covered her mouth, eyes wide. My father, who'd just extended his hand expectantly, stood frozen, his face ashen. I smiled, calmly shaking James's hand. Inside, a victorious note rang. But outwardly, I said softly, "The pleasure's mine, Mr. Summit. I've been looking forward to this moment, too." The room seemed to hold its breath. A secret had just been unveiled, and the ripples were beginning to spread. There are small moments that can shift an entire life. A single handshake, a form of address, and suddenly, nothing is the same. That night at the plaza, amid clinking crystal and soft music, I lived that moment. Remember the last chapter? When James Summit, the name that makes Wall Street tremble, walked into the lobby and headed straight for me. My father, Thomas Mitchell, reached out but was ignored. Then James took my hand, smiling with respect. There you are, Ms. Carter. I've been waiting to meet you. The room held its breath. I looked around. Evelyn covered her mouth, her eyes wide as if disaster had struck. Mark stood petrified, his face flushed, his collar seeming to choke him. And my father! He stepped back, his hand still raised, teetering like a man about to drown. If you've seen my video about the moment a father loses power in front of the world, you'd know that silence was crueler than any insult. Ms. Carter? A guest whispered, the words sparking like a match in gasoline. Whispers spread through the lobby. Carter? As in Carter Labs? The quantum battery company? No way. I thought she was just the Mitchells' wayward daughter. I stood tall, shaking James's hand. My heart pounded, but I remained eerily calm. This was the moment I'd waited years for. My father stammered, his voice hoarse. James, do you know who she is? That's Emma, my daughter. James cut in, his smile unwavering. Of course I know, your daughter, and one of the greatest innovators in energy today. The room erupted in noise. Another glass slipped, shattering. Someone coughed to mask their shock. I could have seized the moment to explain like an accused, but why bother? I'd learned to let the truth speak. I smiled faintly, my eyes scanning the stunned faces. Hello, everyone. Some of you may remember me as Emma Mitchell, but for the past few years, I've gone by another name, Emma Carter. Yes, Carter Labs is my company. A pause. Then the whispers grew louder, more chaotic. Mark snapped awake, shouting, No, this is a scam. She's just a failure who ran away. She hasn't done anything. I turned to my brother, my gaze gentle, like looking at a child thrashing in a nightmare. Mark, you can believe whatever helps you sleep, but the truth is, my company is valued at over $4.2 billion. If you want to know more about how Mark always denied my success to preserve his perfect son image, check out the video I shared about him on my channel. My father stepped forward, his voice trembling. Emma, Carter Labs is really? I nodded, my eyes locked on his. Yes, Dad. The quantum battery technology every EV company is chasing is Carter Labs' product. And tonight, Summit Capital is announcing a strategic partnership with us. Scattered applause broke out, mixed with gasps of disbelief. Evelyn clutched her champagne glass, hissing, Are you trying to humiliate this family at your father's birthday? I turned to her, giving a cold smile. I don't need to humiliate anyone. I just showed up. And it seems the truth has done the rest. James stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder, addressing the room. Ladies and gentlemen, let me clarify. Summit Capital is proud to partner with Carter Labs, the leader in quantum battery technology. And I believe you've all heard the rumors that Mitchell Tech is struggling. Interestingly, Carter Labs, led by Emma, has offered to collaborate to help Mitchell Tech through this crisis. All eyes turned to my father. He bowed his head, his face pale. I stood tall, my voice ringing through the hall. 7 years ago, when I brought my first quantum battery sketch, my family called it child's play. When I left, they called me a traitor, but I didn't disappear. I chose a different path, the Carter path. The air grew thick, as if everyone held their breath. In that moment, I realized something crucial. I no longer needed to prove myself to my family. I was standing before the world, and the world saw me differently. I glanced at my father. He avoided my eyes, his hand trembling on the chair like he was clinging to what remained. I knew this moment had stripped him of his greatest treasure, absolute control. Have you ever dreamed of a crowded room falling silent, with only your heartbeat echoing? I didn't need to dream. I lived that moment on the plaza's stage, among hundreds of powerful guests. And that silence was the perfect backdrop for me to paint the truth my family had tried to erase for years. James Summit took the microphone, his voice commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight isn't just a birthday for a great entrepreneur. It's a milestone for the energy industry. I'm honored to introduce Summit Capital's strategic partner, CEO of Carter Labs, Ms. Emma Carter. The spotlight hit me. Hundreds of eyes locked on, a few coughs, some irrepressible whispers. I took a breath, stepping to the mic. Hello, everyone. Some of you may know me as Emma Mitchell, Thomas Mitchell's daughter, the one called the family's disappointment. The hall buzzed. I saw Evelyn freeze, her champagne glass trembling. Mark shook his head, muttering, No way. My father stood, gripping the chair, his eyes burning into me. I let the noise linger for a moment, then continued, my voice steady. But for years, as Emma Carter, I've built Carter Labs, the leader in quantum battery technology. And tonight, I'm announcing something significant. Carter Labs, with Summit Capital, will acquire 60% of Mitchell Tech's shares. The room exploded, chairs scraped, glasses clinked, questions flew. Mark couldn't take it, shouting, This is a scam! You're just a runaway who did nothing. Mitchell Tech is ours, not yours. I turned to him, smiling lightly as if a breeze. Mark, if you want to call it a scam, check the market value. Carter Labs is valued at $4.2 billion. And we're not just bringing capital, but technology to save this company from collapse. Whispers surged. Guests murmured, Is Mitchell Tech really struggling? I heard they posted a huge loss last quarter. Without Carter Labs, they're done. Evelyn stepped forward, trying to stay composed, but her voice shook. Emma, you're humiliating your father on his birthday. Why this moment? I looked at her, my gaze like steel. Because truth doesn't pick convenient times. It arrives when it's needed. And today, this plaza will witness more than a party. It will witness change. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy, hoarse. Emma, you're saying you and Summit Capital will control this company? Yes, Dad, I replied, each word firm. But remember, this is the chance I'm giving our family. I could have sold this technology to anyone else, but I chose Mitchell Tech, not because it's strong, but because it's weak. He closed his eyes as if swallowing the bitterest pill of his life. Guests began talking loudly. An investor exclaimed, if this is true, Mitchell Tech is saved. But it turns out, his daughter is the one with real power. A reporter raised a camera, flashing incessantly. I knew tomorrow's headlines would flood the news. Mark rushed forward, pointing at me. You can't do this. You have no right. James Summit stood, calmly answering for me. You're mistaken. In business, rights come from value, not names. And tonight, value lies with Emma Carter. Mark was speechless. Evelyn tugged his arm, but both their faces were pale. I turned back to the mic, my voice resounding, each word deliberate. From now on, Carter Labs and Summit Capital will lead Mitchell Tech. This isn't an end, but a rebirth. But this rebirth won't be driven by blind ego. It will be driven by innovation. I saw my father stagger, like a man who'd lost his world. But he no longer fought back. His eyes, sunken, held only confusion. Someone clapped, then another. Gradually, the hall filled with scattered applause, mixed with awe and disbelief. I wasn't seeking cheers. But in that moment, I knew the truth had erupted. No one could deny that the daughter they disowned was the one saving them from the abyss. They say the deepest wounds come from family. I thought that was just a cliche until that moment, standing face to face with my father in the plaza's ballroom under hundreds of curious eyes. The crystal chandeliers cast a cold light over us. He, Thomas Mitchell, the man who once made the tech industry bow, stumbled, clutching a chair like it was his last lifeline. I, the daughter he called a blemish, stood firm, mic in hand, with the truth erupting like an unstoppable volcano. Emma, his voice rasped, his face aging a decade in minutes. Are you turning my party into a humiliation? I looked straight at him. Part of me wanted to soften. After all, he was my father. But the part of me rejected for years rose stronger than ever. No, Dad, I said, my voice calm but icy. I don't need to humiliate anyone. You did that to your own daughter. Whispers stirred again. Some guests secretly recorded, sensing they were witnessing something bigger than a party. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on his. Do you remember when I was 18 showing you my first quantum battery sketch? You called it childish scribbles. You laughed in my face in front of Mark and Evelyn, do you remember? He froze, his lips moving but silent. A guest whispered, My God, even the original idea was rejected by her own family. I continued, my voice rising, not to shout, but to echo through the hall. I remember clearly. The nights I stayed up in the garage, you never asked what I was doing. When I won a research scholarship, you didn't attend the ceremony because Mark had a meeting. When Mom died, you were too busy to show up at her funeral. You left me alone at her grave, holding this necklace, vowing never to bow to that disdain again. I touched the crescent moon on my neck. In that moment, the room was silent. I saw tears glisten in some women's eyes. They understood. My father trembled. His hands, used to wielding power, now clung to the table for balance. Emma, I was wrong, he choked out. But you can't take everything from me like this. I gave a bitter smile. Take? No, Dad. You let it slip through your fingers. You were blinded by the past, ignoring every warning. I didn't take anything. I picked up what you discarded. I remembered all the times I was belittled. The time I attended an industry conference with him, he introduced Mark to everyone. This is the future of Mitchell Tech. Me? He brushed off. My youngest likes tinkering with science. I forced a smile then, but inside, it felt like the air was sucked out of me. Now, in the plaza, he had nowhere to hide. I made him face the old wounds. Evelyn cut in, trying to pull him away. Thomas, don't listen to her. She's just out for revenge. I turned, my gaze cold. If I wanted revenge, I'd have sold this technology to your competitors, but I didn't. I gave Mitchell Tech a chance, the last chance, and you call that revenge? She was speechless. Mark shouted like a man unhinged. You're just a lucky failure. Without Summit, you're nothing. I looked at him, calm. You're wrong, Mark. Without me, Summit wouldn't be here. And you? What have you done besides sitting in the chair Dad set for you? The crowd murmured, some laughed mockingly. Mark's face burned, his fists trembling, but he knew he couldn't argue. I looked back at my father. Dad, this isn't humiliation. This is truth. And it hurts because it reminds you that you abandoned the one who could have saved this company. But today I'm here, not to boast, but to show you that the daughter you called a burden is your last bridge. His eyes glistened, the first time I'd seen him so vulnerable. All his life he'd given orders, received bows. Now, in this crowded hall, he had nothing left to hold on to but his mistakes. Emma, he whispered, his voice shaking like the wind. I've lost everything. I stood firm, unwavering. No, Dad. You only lost the illusion of power, but there's still a chance to fix it, if you learn to listen. The room was silent. I heard my heartbeat and my father's heavy breaths. This was no longer a party. It was a trial where truth was laid bare. And I, the daughter once cast out, was now the judge. They say in my family, no one ever stood by me. I believed that for years. But sometimes when you think you're completely alone, an unexpected voice rises, changing everything. The tension in the plaza's ballroom lingered. Whispers hadn't died down, eyes fixed on my father, me, then Mark and Evelyn, like watching a tragicomic play unfold. My father stood trembling after I'd reopened old wounds. Mark's face burned, swallowing his rage. Evelyn gripped her wineglass, her eyes blazing as if ready to tear me apart. Then, unexpectedly, from a shadowed corner near the stage, a voice rang out, soft, trembling, but clear enough for all to hear. Emma, you're right. I turned, stunned. Madison, my half-sister, who I thought never cared, stood up. In her shimmering champagne gown, she looked like a doll in a display case. For years, I believed she only lived in Evelyn's pampered world, always siding with them, echoing what the family wanted. Yet tonight she looked straight at me, her eyes glistening with a different truth. Evelyn gasped, almost shouting, Madison, be quiet, this isn't your business. But Madison pressed on, her voice growing stronger. No, Mom, this is exactly my business, and I've been silent too long. The room froze. My heart raced, but a spark of light pierced the darkness that had long shrouded my family and me. Madison stepped forward, her eyes on me. Emma, I've always admired you. Even as a kid, I saw you stay up all night with your sketches while everyone mocked you. I never said it, but I kept the scraps of paper you threw away. To me, they were treasures. The hall buzzed again. Guests whispered, Madison, siding with Emma? I thought the whole family turned their backs. I choked up. I never imagined someone had seen me all those years. I remember when you left, Madison continued. They said you betrayed us, but I knew you were just choosing your own path. I wanted to run after you, but I was too scared. Scared of Mom, Dad, Mark, scared of being despised like you. Her words cut through the air like a blade, making Evelyn wince and Mark growl. Madison, you don't know what you're saying. She turned to him, her gaze sharp. No, I know exactly. You always acted like the center of everything, but you've never created anything of your own. You lived off Dad's shadow. Meanwhile, Emma, despite being cast out, built an empire. The room erupted in gasps. Some guests chuckled mockingly. Mark's face paled, his hands trembling. My father slowly raised his head, looking at Madison. In that moment, he realized the wall of his pride was cracking, not just from me, but from the daughter he thought was his most obedient. Madison, his voice faltered. She swallowed tears but stood tall. Dad, I love you, but you were wrong about Emma. So wrong I can't stay silent anymore. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Part of me wanted to hug Madison right then. Part feared this was a fleeting moment. But her resolute eyes told me this was real. I stepped toward her, saying softly but clearly, "Madison, thank you. I thought I was completely alone, but it turns out someone saw me." Her eyes reddened, but the light in them warmed my heart, like a deep wound finely bandaged. Evelyn couldn't take it, screaming, her voice piercing the music. "Madison, she's manipulated you. Emma's no hero. She's just using you for revenge." Madison shook her head, her voice firm. "No, Mom, this isn't revenge. It's justice. And if you can't see that, you're the one obsessed with hate." The air shattered. Half the room turned to Evelyn with disapproving looks. Whispers of judgment rose, making her flush, trembling with rage. I turned back to the mic, my voice resounding. "As you can see, truth always finds a way to speak, even when we try to silence it. Tonight isn't just about me, it's about those who've been silent too long, like Madison. And when one voice dares to rise, others will follow." Scattered applause began, growing louder. I heard a few "bravo" shouts from the back. My father, Thomas Mitchell, sank into a chair, his face drained of color. I saw he was shaken not just by me but by Madison, the daughter he thought was his perfect child. The cracks in his pride had become a gaping wound. I knew things would never be the same. Some battles don't end with a bang, but with a chilling silence. After the pens scratched across the contract, the plaza fell into that silence. My father, Thomas Mitchell, the tycoon who once roared across boardrooms, slumped into a chair, his hands trembling as if he'd just signed his own death warrant. I looked at him. The man who once shouted to shake rooms, raised champagne like he held the world, now looked like an old man lost. The chandelier's light no longer glorified him. It exposed his emptiness. Evelyn whispered, her voice shrill with panic. "Thomas, you can't let her take everything. Stand up, fight back." But he shook his head, eyes vacant. "Evelyn, you don't understand. It's over." Mark gritted his teeth, nearly shouting, "Dad, I'll appeal, I'll sue, I'll—" "Enough, Mark." My father cut him off, his voice hoarse. "There's nothing left to sue. She won." The room held its breath. For the first time in decades, Thomas Mitchell admitted defeat. I stepped closer. To the crowd, I could have gloated. I had every right to crush him, as he once crushed me, but instead, my heart felt heavy. When you face someone who hurt you and see them crumble, you realize revenge doesn't heal wounds. It only deepens the divide. I leaned down, speaking softly but loud enough for the room. "Dad, I'm not taking everything. I'm leaving you something." He looked up, his eyes clouded with tears. "What?" I took a breath, then said clearly, "An honorary advisor role." The room stirred. Some thought I was mocking him, but I continued, my voice steady. "You built Mitchell Tech from nothing. I don't deny that. That history deserves respect. You won't have power, but you can keep your honor. A lifelong honorary advisor title will always carry your name. Not because you need it, but because I believe you still have value." Silence fell. I felt the shocked stares. They expected me to destroy him, but I offered an olive branch. Evelyn laughed harshly. "Ridiculous! She's pitying you, Thomas. Will you accept a puppet role?" I turned, my smile bitter. "No, Evelyn, this isn't pity. It's compassion. Something you'll never understand." Mark muttered, "No way. She's humiliating Dad with an empty title." I looked at him, my voice sharp. "You're wrong, Mark. Power can be lost, but value endures. Dad deserves to be remembered as the founder, not a failure. And I, the daughter he cast out, am the only one who can give him that chance." I turned back, looking down at my father. He trembled, his hand covering half his face. In his eyes, I saw something new, brokenness mixed with gratitude. "Emma," he whispered, "why do this, after everything I've done?" I smiled faintly. "Because I don't want to become a second version of you. I want to prove strength isn't about crushing others but offering them a seat even after they've fallen." Applause began, sparse at first, then spreading across the room. It wasn't for me, it was for that moment of compassion. Guests understood. A family feud had turned into a lesson in humanity. My father sat motionless, tears rolling down his cheeks. He'd never cried in public, yet tonight he wept in the plaza. Madison quietly approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Dad, accept it. This isn't defeat. It's a chance to keep some honor." He nodded, trembling like a forgiven child. Evelyn stormed off, her heels clacking on the marble floor. Mark stood frozen, silent. I knew for him this was a bigger shock than losing the company. He couldn't fathom why I chose compassion over destruction. But I understood. For years I lived in the shadow of resentment. I thought when I had the chance to turn the tables, I'd revel in revenge. But standing before my broken father, I realized true victory isn't making others kneel, but standing tall in your own heart. I chose forgiveness, not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to be free. They say the hardest people to accept the truth are not enemies, but family. After that night at the plaza, I thought Mark would cut me off forever. But life has a way of twisting unexpectedly. After the announcement, I was called to a small meeting room off the main hall to sign additional papers with Summit Capital's legal team. The air was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. A long walnut table, leather chairs with a sharp scent, and a chilled water pitcher. It felt like stepping into a courtroom. I was reviewing terms when the door swung open. Mark stood there. His jacket was disheveled, tie half undone, face flushed like he'd been fighting himself. I braced for a tirade, or worse, a punch. But he just stood, breathing heavily, as if unsure where to begin. "Emma," he finally said, his voice rough, "I need to talk." I set down my pen, motioning for the legal team to leave. When the door closed, it was just us in the sealed room. I crossed my arms, leaning back. "You have 5 minutes. I'm guessing you'll use them to call me a traitor again?" Mark gave a crooked smile. "No, I don't have the strength for that anymore." He stepped to the table, hands bracing the wood. His usually cold blue eyes were redrimmed. "You know, my whole life, Dad praised me, called me the future of Mitchell Tech. But tonight, for the first time, I saw I'm just a shadow. An empty one." I stayed silent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wanted to hear him out. This was the first time Mark spoke to me without arrogance. He continued, his voice shaking. "I was jealous of you, Emma, jealous since the day you dared to leave, because I never could. I envied you chasing your passion while I was trapped in a perfect facade. I thought if I denied you long enough, you'd vanish. But you didn't. You came back and exposed my failure." He laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "I lived off Dad's breath. Without him, I don't know who I am. But you built a world without anyone's backing." I looked at my brother, the one who once screamed I'd never be anything but a failure. And for the first time, he seemed small, fragile. "Mark," I said slowly, "do you know what hurt most? Not that you were favored, but that you knew I was cast out and never reached out. You didn't have to fight for me, but just once say, 'My sister has value.' You didn't. And I had to fill that void myself." Mark bowed his head, shoulders trembling. "I know, and I regret it." The room fell silent. I heard the clock tick, our heavy breaths. Then I took a deep breath and stepped closer. "But Mark, you have a chance. Not to redo the past, it's gone, but to build a different future. If you want, I'll give you a role at Carter Labs. Not because you're my brother, but because I believe people can change. But this time, you have to prove yourself." He looked up, eyes wide with shock. "Emma, after everything, you'd give me a chance?" I smiled faintly. "Not for you, for us. This family's been broken too long. If we don't start somewhere, we'll never heal." Mark froze. Then, unexpectedly, he extended his hand. The hands that once pushed me away now trembled, waiting. I saw the bitter memories flash by, but I placed my hand in his, gripping firmly. In that moment, the cold wall between us began to crack. "Emma," he whispered, "I won't let you down again." I nodded. "I don't need you to be a hero, just be real." The hall outside buzzed, but in that small room, a silent war ended. No winners, no losers, just two siblings finally seeing each other as human. Some mornings you wake up knowing nothing will ever be the same. That morning, as I stepped into Mitchell Tech's headquarters, now under a new name, I felt that change deeply. On the glass facade, reflecting the morning sun, new metallic letters gleamed. Mitchell Carter Innovations. I paused, staring at the words, a feeling hard to describe swelling within. It wasn't just a name, it was proof I'd turned a wound into strength. Inside, the wide hallway felt reborn. Evelyn's ostentatious paintings were gone, replaced by posters of clean energy, quantum batteries, and a sustainable future. No more heavy scent of old power, just fresh paint and the air of a new beginning. Employees passing by nodded with curiosity and respect. Some whispered, "That's her, Emma Carter." For the first time, instead of feeling burdened, I felt I deserved those looks. My office was at the end of the hall, where my father's once stood. The door opened, light flooding the spacious room. I stepped in, feeling both foreign and familiar. His old wooden desk remained, but the cluttered papers were replaced by a laptop and battery prototypes. On the desk was a small gift wrapped in plain brown paper. I opened it. Inside was an old technical book, its spine worn, pages yellowed. My heart sank at the familiar handwriting, my mother's. A small note was tucked in the last page, her shaky but clear script. "For Emma, you will change the world in your own way." I sat, my hands trembling as I traced her words, the formulas she'd underlined when teaching me. Memories flooded back. Our Brooklyn apartment, nights together, the crescent moon necklace in my hand. My eyes blurred, but my heart lit up, as if someone had ignited a lamp. My mother's legacy wasn't money or status, it was belief, and that belief brought me here today. The door creaked open. My father stepped in. No longer in his commanding suit, just an older man in a gray coat, his eyes quiet. In that moment, he wasn't Tycoon Mitchell, but a father trying to reach his daughter. "Emma," his voice rasped, "can I sit?" I nodded. He sat across from me, his eyes lingering on my mother's book. "This is your mother's?" "Yes," I said. "She always believed I could do this." He sighed, looking at his wrinkled hands. "I was wrong too many times, blinded by pride, by power. I missed your mother's funeral, your youth. Last night, signing that contract, I thought it was over. But this morning, I realized there's one thing I can still do." I waited silently. He looked up, eyes wet. "Emma, I want to learn from you. Not about batteries or business, but how to be human. Can you teach me what I never dared to do? Listen?" I froze. For years, I'd longed for his acknowledgement, and now he offered it with genuine regret. In that moment, the cold, steely father melted into someone fragile, raw, but more real than ever. I smiled faintly, tears falling. "Dad, I don't need you to learn from me. Just don't repeat the past. Be a different father to Madison, even Mark, one who knows compassion." He nodded, gripping the table. "I'll try, I promise." In that moment, I knew an old chapter had closed, not with screams, but with a belated apology. Sometimes, late is better than never. Outside the glass, sunlight hit the Mitchell Carter Innovation sign. I saw my mother's smile in my mind, as if she were saying, "You did it." That afternoon, I called a company-wide meeting. I stood on the podium, looking at hundreds of faces below, engineers, researchers, staff, all holding their breath. "Today," I said, my voice resounding, "we become Mitchell Carter Innovations. This isn't just a merger of names, it's a fusion of past and future. From the legacy Thomas Mitchell built to the technology Carter Labs created, we will write a new story." Thunderous applause filled the room. I saw my father in the front row, his face damp but eyes full of pride. A look I'd waited my whole life to see. You see, some legacies can't be measured by money or power. My mother left me a necklace, a technical book, and the belief I deserved my own path. Now I understand. That was the greatest legacy. I didn't just reclaim justice for myself. I saved what remained of my family from self-destruction. And above all, I learned that compassion is the ultimate victory. My story ends here, but its values endure. I've walked through rejection, loneliness, and moments I thought I couldn't stand. But in the end, I realized true strength isn't in revenge, but in daring to forgive, to be compassionate, compassion for yourself, to not be chained to the past, compassion for others, to leave room for healing. I found the legacy my mother left, not just a book or necklace, but the belief that we can all shine in our own way, despite disdain or abandonment. And when I reached out to my father, my brother, I understood. Happiness isn't defeating someone but no longer needing to prove anything. If this story resonates with you, giving you empathy, courage, or simply belief, please like, comment, and subscribe, because who knows, the next story might be the one you're waiting for.